Let's head back to Kenya, where Gen Z has dismissed talks with President William Ruto, saying his leadership cannot be trusted, citing an emerging trend of abduction, a government not in touch with the people's needs, a high cost of living and unemployment as the main reasons. In recent weeks, Kenya has witnessed an unprecedented uprising led primarily by young Kenyans for the government's failure to heed the people's will. The trigger for this revolt by Generation Z is the Parliament's approval of new taxation measures, which the youth argue are not only punitive but oppressive and exacerbate an already unbearable cost of living. Meanwhile, Kenya's cost of living has been on a relentless upward trajectory, with the prices of necessities becoming increasingly unaffordable for the average citizen. And to unpack this, I'm joined by Tele Nzomo, Program Officer, Siasa Place. He joins us from Nairobi, Kenya. Good afternoon from here. Glad to have you join me.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. I mean, one thing we have seen in this protest is the interest of Gen Z, Generation Z. Why are they so interested and resistant, when it comes to this protest in Kenya? And why have they refused to dialogue with the President, William Ruto?
I think that the challenges we're facing as a country have been there for quite a while, and people have been speaking about them for a long time. And what happened is that people didn't listen, right? It wasn't just recent. It's not just what's happening in recent days. People have been trying to say that the cost of living has been going up. Unemployment is a big problem. The economy has been a huge issue. And this goes back to, William Ruto's predecessor's time, Uhuru Kenyatta. People have been complaining, but no one has been listening to them. When you talk about the recent finance bill that really became now the trigger for the violence, or rather not the violence, but the protests that we're seeing. During public participation, a lot of organizations, a lot of groups tried to warn Parliament that this bill was a bad idea, but they didn't listen. So the reason why a lot of people don't want dialogue is that they have been speaking and no one has been listening. So now people are telling government, we don't want to talk to you, we want you to implement. No dialogue, just implementation.
I mean, I watched the address of the president, and then he claims he understands the concerns of Generation Z, but then the protest was hijacked by criminals. He referenced state parliaments being burnt, office of chief of staff being burnt, and property worth about 24 million shillings, destroyed in Kenya. What do you think about that statement he made?
I think the statement was a bit unfortunate. I think what has happened is that the protests largely have been very peaceful. But when you talk about violence, a big instigator of this violence has been the police, right? The police have been tear gassing peaceful protesters. As long as they see people marching, they tear gas them. Now, the moment you go down that route, you start causing, or rather, you start causing chaos. It might be that yes, in some areas there are elements of some people who want to cause trouble. One of the issues that is coming up is that there are also certain political games that are going on. There's been seems to be a falling out between the president and his deputy, and this could also be part of the reason that is causing some of that is bringing in the elements of some protesters who are causing damage. But the protesters themselves have been peaceful. I think the biggest blame here lies squarely with the police.
One of the things that President William Ruto also referenced is the need for clearing debts, in the country. The country, has a high rate of debts. I mean, they are owing the IMF. And so, more or less, it seems as though he has no choice but to increase taxes. Do you think this measure is in order?
It's not in order. I think one of the things that has happened is that since he has taken over, has debt gone up or has debt gone down? Debt has risen, right? He has increased the debt that we have in the country. Number two, our biggest problem with the economy is definitely an expenditure problem. I think I've mentioned this before on this platform. Our problem is not raising revenue; it is expenditure. We waste so much money on things that are not needed. We have a bloated government. The government, he has increased the size of the executive from his predecessor's time. He has hired more people, more more advisors. He's wasted money. They are spending so much money on renovating State House, the Deputy President's house, close to over a billion. They're spending billions of shillings on renovations. Really, it's more of an expenditure issue. So this idea that the president needs to tax Kenyans in order to pay our debts, I don't believe it. I don't really buy into that idea.
Now let's talk solutions now. I mean, looking at this gap between the president and then the Gen Z, how can it be bridged? It seems as though, because we saw protests of them calling for him to resign, to step down. I mean, and it's looking like come 2027, the next Kenya election year, he may be voted out. So how do we resolve this issue, this gap between the president and then the Gen Z?
I think from the president's side, he needs to, as I said, it's more of an implementation matter. I think if he can start, number one, he needs to ensure that the fight against corruption is seen and is taken seriously. I think he has to make changes in government. I think there are certain cabinet secretaries that he definitely has to get rid of. He has to show that he has intentions of cutting the budget, but cutting the budget in the right area. I want to be very clear on that, cutting the budget in the right area. Let him not go and start saying he has to cut money that is going to education. He has to cut money that is going to healthcare. Let him cut budget for, I know yesterday, and I think this is a good move, he spoke about cutting the budget that is going to the office of the First Lady, the office of the spouse of the Deputy President. Those are the things that now Kenyans want to see. I think if he can show that, action, I think the pressure on him will reduce. Though I do think there are elements of people who are very keen on him leaving. But if he proves to implement, or rather to give actions that show that he's seriously listened to the Kenyan people, and we start seeing changes within the economy, I think that will reduce the pressure on him, though it will be very, very difficult for him come 2027.
Well, we hope things are resolved and then there is synergy between the president and then his people and, of course, the Gen Z. Well, thank you so much for your insight on the news. Tele Nzomo, Program Officer, Siasa Place. You joined from Nairobi, Kenya. Many thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me again.